think it's my turn, isn't it, John?
I also can't recall, so feel free.
the excitement and the power. Yeah. Okay, so on 7. So if we get underway, big welcome to this meeting of the Acocks Green Ward Forum. It's slightly different from the last virtual meeting in that we're using a sort of more open access form of Teams, and hopefully that will allow more people to participate by doing it this way. It's a bit easier to gain access, but we'll see how it goes. First, can I formally notify everyone attending that a recording of this meeting, is being recorded, and that if you wish, a copy of the meeting will be available for future record to look back at if you want to. Now, the first item on the agenda is a very topical one, which is an update from on the COVID-19 situation from the public health team. I'm just seeing if we got Justin. Has Justin arrived, or is someone else doing that for us?
Rachel's with us today.
Ah, right. Okay. So Rachel Chapman from the public health team is going to do a short presentation on this and then take some questions. Would that be all right, Rachel?
You're muted.
Muted.
You know, I can't believe I still do that after all these months of Teams meetings. How long would you like me to talk for?
Well, if we said 5 to 10 minutes and then give questions, I anticipate there'll be quite a few questions, but you never can tell.
No problem. So thank you very much. So my name's Rachel Chapman. I'm a public health specialty registrar as part of the public health team at Birmingham City Council. Obviously, apologies from Justin not being able to be here tonight. I did shadow him last week, so hopefully I'll be able to do this some justice. But if there's anything that you ask me that I don't know, I'm more than happy to take it back to Justin. I've just actually just prepared some notes really just to whiz through for myself, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions at the end of this. So in terms of COVID, as you know, this appeared on the scene probably just before Christmas last year, so this is still a very new infection to us. It's part of a family of viruses which range from the common cold to some more serious illnesses such as SARS and MERS, and this is a new strain of the virus. It hit us back in early March. We had a first peak in April, then the numbers reduced, and back in the summer, sort of June, July time, our numbers were low, but we do have to remember we didn't have the amount of testing that we've got in place now. We started to see the numbers creep up around July time, where we entered what the government were calling enhanced support and then national intervention. And then, as you know, a few weeks ago, we entered tier 2 in terms of restrictions. And as of tomorrow, we're sort of joining the rest of the nation in the next lockdown or circuit breaker for a month. And that's really been driven by the latest lot of national data that have come out, which looked at rates of infection across England. And it showed that the infection is rising across all of the age groups and all of the regions in England. And with the biggest increase actually in the 55 to 64-year-old age group. So the age groups that we start to worry about potentially more health impact. The highest number of infections are still in the northwest and Yorkshire, as we've seen on the news. But as I say, the numbers are rising across the whole of England, hence the national approach to lockdown. When we look at Birmingham, our rates have been rising steadily over the last few weeks, and this week we're at around 260 per 100,000. What we have seen is an increase in the percentage of people who are testing positive. So in the last week, nearly 15% of those who tested were positive. A couple of months ago, it was around 3%. So it is a significant increase. I think the thing to point out, though, is that our current rate rise is quite slow and steady. This is unlike some of the other areas. So, for example, Manchester and Liverpool, they saw that massive, very steep increase. What we have seen is a sort of very slow and steady increase. And we think this is down to the hard work that so many people have already been doing, trying to sort of prevent the spread of this virus. I should mention that there's other areas, the West Midlands, that are also high. So Walsall, Dudley, Cannock Chase, Stoke, Sandwell, Wolverhampton have also got relatively high rates. But having said that, we're all a lot lower than the Northwest. Blackburn and Darwin at the moment is over 700 per 100,000. So I think in the table at the moment, we're ranking around 53rd in terms of rates. All of the evidence is showing us that COVID is being spread mostly through social interactions between people. Most of our cases are in younger age groups, so the 16 to 29-year-olds, but across Birmingham, we've seen a sharp growth in case rates in all ages, including the sort of 30, 40, 50-year-olds, and also the over 60s in the last few weeks. We've also seen increases in all of our ethnic groups, but we consistently have higher rates of cases in our Asian populations. These increasing rates that we're seeing in the older populations, we're now starting to see more cases in hospital, and very sadly, we're starting to see an increase in the number of deaths. We do have more effective treatments than we had in the first peak, so people who go into hospital are often then staying in hospital longer because of the treatments that are available. But this then has an impact, a knock-on impact down the system. So there's an impact on ambulances who can't discharge to hospital at the moment. I asked for some detail on Acocks Green specifically, so we could look at your rates. In terms of number of cases over the last 7 days, I can't remember the exact number, but it's sort of in the 60s, and so you rank 10th out of all of our wards in terms of number of cases. But when we look at rate, because it's a relatively large ward, actually your rate is only just above the Birmingham average, so you're sort of ranking in about the middle. When we look at the cases over the last month, you're following a very similar pattern to the rest of Birmingham, in that the majority of the cases are in the 20 to 39-year-old age groups, and just under half are in Asian ethnic groups. So that's the sort of picture in Birmingham and the picture locally in Acocks Green. Just sort of moving on then to what's in place. Obviously, we've got the national lockdown as of midnight tonight, which I'm sure you'll already picked up isn't quite the same as last time round. We still need to isolate as households or bubbles. People can meet one person outdoors in a public place from another household, but other than specific purposes, you must not leave or be outside of your home. The government has ordered that many businesses and venues close, so the non-essential retail, leisure facilities, entertainment venues, etc. But where people are asked to work from home, but where they can't, or they need to travel for education or caring or hospital or GP appointments, then that is when it's acceptable to be out and about. I think one of the big differences from last time is that the schools are going to remain open because it's recognised just how important education is for our young people. And at the moment, the government haven't reintroduced shielding, but those who were shielded last time have been advised to take extra care and only work from home. So that's the sort of the latest on the national lockdown. In terms of locally, I think one of the messages we want to continue pushing out is the importance of getting tested. So anybody who's experiencing any of the symptoms of COVID, so the new persistent cough, the loss of sense of taste or smell, or a temperature, it's really important that they stay at home and organise to get tested. In terms of testing sites, we've got a couple of the drive-in sites. And if you go to those, they actually do the swabbing for you. And then we've now got 9 walk-in sites in Birmingham where they talk you through it, but you sort of have to do it yourself. And this is where you have to stick the swab up your nose and into your throat. One of the consultants at Public Health England described it to me as tickle your brain and your tonsils, which I don't think is very pleasant. In terms of Acocks Green, your closest walk-in site, I think, is Saltley Health and Wellbeing Centre. There are proposals to try and get a few more sites in place, but these are they're currently in the system in the process of looking at these. I'd stress that I know there has been an issue in accessing testing, but there are plenty of appointments now available. And our testing rates overall have reduced over the last few weeks, and anything anybody can do to get the message out about the importance of getting tested. They've seen this nationally as well, and the feeling is that there might be a bit of apathy. You know, we've had, it feels like COVID has been around for a long time. And there's also perhaps groups of the population who don't want to get tested because they don't want to get the results and then have to deal with that. But it's really important that we still promote just how important it is for people to get tested so that they know if they've got the virus. You've probably heard about antibody tests. So the tests I've been talking about are the antigen tests, which test if you've actually got COVID. The antibody tests are blood tests to see if you've had it in the past. These are available for those employed by the NHS and social care at the moment. It's really part of a sort of surveillance research project. You can get it done privately. It's about £150, but we don't recommend this because all it does is tell you if you've had the virus. What it doesn't tell you is whether you're immune or if you could get it again. And we know that there are quite a lot of people who get COVID who don't develop antibodies at all, and some the body forgets. So Justin's advice is very much don't waste your money on an antibody test at the moment. However, do get the antigen test if you've got the symptoms. There's talk in the media about new tests. At the moment, the tests that we do, samples have to be sent off to the lab, and it can take 24, 48 hours for the results to be turned around just because of the length of time it takes to actually do the science bit to do the test. There is a more rapid process for that, which is coming out. And then there's also something, and these are called lateral flow tests. These are a bit like a pregnancy test where you spit on a stick and get the result in a few minutes. This is something that is currently being developed. It's going to be useful for where we need to test in high volumes. So, for example, the front door of the hospital as people are going through, because you can find out straight away whether they're testing positive for COVID. Also, for example, university students, where we want to do mass testing. So this is something I think you'll hear more about over the next few weeks. Am I all right to still keep going? I've got a few more bits to cover. Is that all right for time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Carry on. Thanks,
Thank you. In terms of reducing your risk of being very ill, so if you catch COVID, what can you do to reduce your risk of being very ill? Now, Justin very much talks about there's 3 things you can't change and 3 things you can. So in terms of the things you can't change, it's your age. Older people are much more likely to become very ill. Being a man, again, men are more likely to become very ill, and ethnicity. We have heard quite a lot in the press about the impact of COVID on different ethnic groups. And basically, if you're not from a white ethnic background, you are at greater risk of being ill. And those things we can't do anything about. So we'd really like to focus on the 3 things that you can alter. So the first one is in terms of stopping smoking. We know people who smoke are more likely to have quite a severe illness. But we also recognise just how difficult it is to stop smoking. And the average is it takes people 11 attempts to actually achieve this. So if you know anybody who does smoke, this is a really good time to encourage them to try to quit. Stop smoking services are still available online. So there is support still out there. And actually people who get support are more likely to quit. So that's definitely a message that we want to spread. The second thing we can change is in terms of obesity. Obese individuals, again, are more likely to be quite ill with COVID. So what we're trying to do is very much promote that sort of healthy approach to what we eat and doing some regular exercise. And I think it's very much about promoting that small changes do actually make a really big difference. I think during lockdown, it's been very easy to sort of perhaps not eat as healthily as we would, and definitely not do as much exercise as we have done. But making those small changes can make a really big difference to people's overall health. And then the final one in terms of things that people can change is better control of any chronic diseases. So people with long-term conditions, particularly diabetes or heart disease, again, are more likely to be ill from COVID. So this is a really good time to look at how well people feel that their diseases are controlled, and get in touch with the GP. Talk to your practice if there's any sort of further advice that you want. So those are the things that we can do. If I could just flag up, the public health team has produced a resource called Be Healthy, which is a series of sort of practical things which can help our leaders across the city, so community leaders, faith leaders, anybody who's sort of working with communities, to support them to reduce their risk of becoming ill. So that there's webinars on there, there's resources, there's guidance about all the sorts of little things that we can do to help ourselves be healthy and reduce our risk of becoming severely ill if we catch COVID. There's a pledge on there, so people can sign up to being a sort of Be Healthy pledge. There's a checklist for people who like checklists, or a sort of weekly plan, and those are available in different languages. And then sort of just a couple of things to finish off. Obviously, let's talk about a vaccine. The development of vaccines, as you know, is going on across the world. There are many in development. When we look at vaccines, obviously what we need to do is find out whether it works. So first of all, does it work in the lab? Then does it work in humans? Does it work in different groups of people? And then is it safe? And then how long does it work for? Is it a vaccine that we would need to regularly give because the body forgets? Or is it something that once we've given it, or a couple of doses, the body can remember? So there's a lot of work that goes into developing a vaccine. And normally it takes a couple of years to do this. Obviously, we're doing this at pace. Hopefully, we will have a vaccine available soon. We still need more information on how good it is. But just so that you know, the NHS is working really hard behind the scenes so that when we have the vaccine, we've got a plan in place to roll out mass vaccination of the population, because this is going to be on a scale of something that we've never done before. And it will start with those at highest risk first. In terms of things that we can all do to reduce COVID, basically sort of everything that we do can help reduce the spread. So the national message about hands, face and space is still really, really important. It feels really basic, and I know we've sort of been talking about this since the start, but washing your hands regularly, wearing a face covering when you're out, and that 2 metre social distancing are the really key things that everybody as individuals can do to help reduce the spread of COVID. And I think because it's been around now for a few months, that there's sort of people are getting tired of it, and particularly the 2 metre social distancing, but it makes such a difference in our risk of catching it. And this is where we're relying on everybody to work together to do this. We've got the Test and Trace app, which can be downloaded. And then, as I said earlier, anybody with symptoms, get tested, stay at home, complete the self-isolation period, and that's for the case and the contacts. And that is really, really important to help stop the spread. And unfortunately, I've sort of been involved in a few instances where people have had symptoms, but then they've not stayed at home, and so that they haven't, obviously, it's not been deliberate, but they've ended up spreading it to people around them. So the message is very much, please stay at home. We have our community COVID community champions. At the start of this week, we got 396 signed up, so nearly 400. So our COVID champions we send out regularly latest information about COVID, and then all we ask is that they share the information with anybody in the community however they want to. So through conversations, through any sort of interactions they have with people, it's just an opportunity to share information. But because the information is coming from us, we know it's real information. It's we're not sort of then spreading the risk of any sort of this fake news. And it's also it's very much a two-way conversation. So we ask the COVID community champions to let us know what's working, what isn't working, what the feedback is, how people are responding, because that then helps us with what messages we do, so that together we can make sure that everybody's got the information that they need. The government's recently announced COVID marshals, who are going to be sort of visible individuals to help encourage compliance, working with individuals and businesses out and about. So reminders about masks, they'll have masks to hand out. It's not enforcement, but it is that sort of visible reminder. And then finally, just to say, we've also got the whistleblowing helpline, which is through the Birmingham Council website. We've had about 2,000 different reports, which is it's really, really good information for us to get. All of these are dealt with by our environmental health team, who look at them all and then decide what action we need to take. So it's really helpful information that we can then work with our sort of local businesses and communities. So I think overall, I think the message is we all need to carry on doing our bit. We'll only do this. Oh, sorry, I think I've got some background noise. We'll only beat COVID by everybody doing their bit. Through.
Veronica, can you put yourselves on mute, please?
Thank you. So hands, face, space, follow the guidance. It feels like this is the long haul, but it really is so important, and that by working together we'll be able to keep Birmingham safe. So that's the sort of the information I have, but more than happy for any questions or comments or thoughts or feedback from yourselves. Actually, if there's anything you've picked up while you've been out and about or talking to people.
Do we have any questions? Anne?
It was just, yes, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law came up today, and we had a sort of COVID separated lunch, and they were very concerned. They come from Witney in Oxford, of how little numbers are actually wearing masks in Acocks Green compared with where they are, which is in the lowest tier. And so
and I think it is really important that we get that information back. Did they sort of specify anywhere in particular that they'd seen that?
Well, one was Costa's in Acocks Green, the coffee shop.
Okay.
And they said that they could not. They had asked people, but if they wouldn't put them on, they couldn't stop them.
Yeah.
And also just general walking through the village.
So sort of outside at the moment, it's not a requirement. It is more, it's when we're inside.
Yeah.
And I do recognise that some people aren't able to for medical reasons, but I think that's one of the roles that the COVID marshals will be able to have. And just that visibility, it's about raising awareness and the importance of doing it to protect others around you. So I think these are messages we need to keep getting out there.
Yes, definitely.
Any more questions? Nick?
Oh, hi, Rachel. I think I might have missed it. I think you mentioned that GPs and things are staying open for normal appointments. Will pharmacies and opticians and dentists be staying open, or do they need to close along with the other shops?
As far as pharmacies will definitely be open. As far as I'm aware, opticians and dentists also will be. I know not all dentists are necessarily doing the routine appointments. That some of them are doing more just the emergency treatments. Opticians, I don't specifically know about. I'm just wondering if it's in the guidance that I've got here. But certainly in terms of healthcare to treat individuals, all of those services should still be open, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other thing I'd perhaps suggest, I know we're going into the national lockdown tonight, which is another new set of guidance, but it really is worth sort of trying to stay on top of it. Yeah, I've read through the tier 2 guidance many times, so that we understand what we should and shouldn't be doing in terms of meeting up with people. I think when we go the national lockdown, I suppose the guidance there is quite clear. So nobody else inside your house, no meeting up with others, except you could meet one person from one household, can meet one person from another out in a public place. And this really is just recognising the sort of mental health challenges that people experience first time round with the lockdown.
Okay, any more questions for Rachel? Now, can I ask one, which is what the sort of you mentioned 3 things that we can do to minimise the impact if we do get COVID. One of the things that's surprised me a bit, having sort of followed some of the blogs and so on about it, is that there has been relatively little advice about getting checked for vitamin D levels. And I know that there is some sort of very loose government guidance that you know it would be a good idea to take some low levels of vitamin D. But given the fact that there's been some studies which show that it significantly reduces the impact of COVID if you've got good vitamin D levels, or if you take it when you get it. I'm just surprised it hasn't got a bit more profile, but I don't know if there's an official view on that.
You know, it's a really, really good question, and I think it's an area we're going to hear more about. They've done scientific studies where they've shown that people in hospital with COVID are much more likely to have very low levels of vitamin D. And so there's currently studies going on to see that if you take vitamin D, does that either help prevent, you know, you sort of being ill, or help prevent you actually then ending up in hospital with it. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about it. However, the NHS now recommends that people take a vitamin D supplement anyway. On the NHS Choices website, if you type in vitamin D, you'll be able to find this, particularly in the winter, because we all spend a lot of time inside in the winter, and probably during lockdown we've had more time inside than we would normally. So just from the sort of health point of view, there is a recommendation that people take a vitamin D supplement if they're unlikely to get enough vitamin D from their diet, or if they're not spending a lot of time outside. So actually, from a sort of general point of view, and we know it's important for the immune system, we could all be looking at taking a vitamin D supplement. Obviously, anybody with any health concerns might want to discuss it with a GP first. Whilst we can't say it's going to prevent or treat COVID, certainly from the point of view of our general health, as I say, that there is a sort of recommendation that we do. So I've got a multivitamin with vitamin D in. So anybody who wants to have a look at that, as I say, I'd recommend just typing vitamin D into the NHS website, and that will give you some further advice on that. So yeah, it's one of these that I can't say for definite, but it looks like that's the way we're going. If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Nick, have you got a further question?
Oh yeah, it's just on the vitamin D. I think that's a really good point, actually, Roger. And I was just going to say, actually, you can get online tests for vitamin D. I think they're about £30. And if you are concerned about it, because I think what Rachel's just said, 100% agree with. I think we all in the Northern Hemisphere are notorious for vitamin D deficiency. And it has a lot of health impacts. So I just was going to say, if you are concerned, and because of COVID, you can actually get a test for around £30 online, just for information, really.
Thank you. Yes, as I say, it's always important with these things to make sure you don't take too much of it. So, and anybody with sort of any concerns about it, you absolutely discuss it with a pharmacist or with your GP. But yes, certainly from a point of view of our general health, then this is something we can look at.
Without hogging the issue on it, I mean, the other interesting aspect of it is that, of course, the darker your skin, the slower you absorb vitamin D. So this whole issue about people from ethnic minority groups having higher mortality from COVID, there's a potential link there, which hopefully is being investigated by researchers and so on to check out that side of it. But it's doesn't prove anything, but it's certainly something to consider, and particularly if you have got darker skin, to be worth checking out. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. Obviously, with our sort of ethnic minorities, we think there are many factors involved, and it's very complex. But the lack of vitamin D is one thing that has been suggested as perhaps a contributor.
Yeah, sure. Yes, as you say, it's a complicated issue when you start diving into it. Yeah. Any more questions? No. Well, can I thank you very much, Rachel? I know this must be a hugely busy time to put it mildly. So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us this evening, and it's very much appreciated what you and the team are doing at the moment, and will no doubt be continuing to work over the coming months as the situation develops.
Oh no, thank you for having me. And if you have any more questions, just sort of email them through to me.
Thank you. You're an excellent stand-in for Justin.
Thank you. I'll tell him. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to clone him yet, so we've only got one of him.
That's an interesting idea.
Go back against it.
Oh, thank you all.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Right. Next item is local update. And I think what I'll do is I'll just jig the order around a bit. We've got Simon Graham, who is our constituency inspector. Is that the right title, Simon?
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Colin. Sorry, Roger. Sorry, yeah, no problem.
Yep. And he's very kindly joined the meeting today to give us an update on local policing issues. Okay, Simon, if it's okay, if you could, give a sort of 5-10 minute just discussion about what the sort of local issues are at the moment. I mean, no doubt part of that will be linking into the COVID situation, and then again, give the opportunity for people to ask questions.
Yeah, no problem. So first of all, if I can get apologies for Sergeant Woolaway. He's not been able to make it tonight. His family have been on holiday and they're back today, so he's had to collect them from the airport and meet and greet and things like that. So he's done me a brief report, which I'll talk through. And then I've done some crime stats as well, just over the last, year to date, just around a range of different offences within the Acocks Green area. So from Craig's report, the current priorities, which have changed obviously in the last sort of 3 or 4 days, 5 days, wherever it's been, but COVID and enforcement, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, is now pretty much one of the force priorities, if not the force priority, for at least the next week. And I think, if I'm honest, probably what we'll do, I assume at higher levels than I work at, there'll be a decision made further than that regarding what we do next, if we do anything next, and what our policing style is. I think once we gauge what the public's reaction to these further restrictions are, if that makes sense. So I suppose if loads of people say, well, we don't care, we're going out, I'd imagine we'll get tighter. If people seem to be abiding by the guidelines and not gathering where they shouldn't be and just doing what they should be, maybe we'll sort of, come back off it a little bit. But I'll talk about that fraction more shortly. As you know, I think we talked about it at Local Partners Delivery Group. Councillor Harmer raised the issue of off-road bikes on the BMX track in Gospel Park. So I know there's been a lot of community activity down there, doing clear-ups, high visibility from members of the community to try and have that sort of capable guardianship in the area to try and deter antisocial behaviour. And then Sergeant Woolaway and the team, they've been down there. They were there last weekend and they've done other things, been on bikes. He tried to get the drone and some traffic resources for Saturday. The downside is it all coincided with Halloween, when obviously that is a drain on our resources from a force perspective. So he wasn't able to get those resources, but he has got some further bids in throughout the month of November, in particular for the off-road bikes. So hopefully, again, if we compete with other force priorities, we hopefully will get those sort of resources. And let's have a look. So there's a statement he says we've obtained today from Mike Hinton, who's the parks manager that many of you will know. And the team have been visible in the park recently. And as I said, they're planning further proactive activity where possible. They were, because one of the things that we're having to pause, and that's all it is at the moment, a pause on any of our non-essential warrants. So where we force entry to someone's house to search, basically. And we've got information about who is likely to be involved, a local person who's likely to be involved in the use of off-road bikes in that particular area. So we were in the process of getting a search warrant under the Criminal Damage Act to allow us. We probably wouldn't enter by force for the nature of it, but it would give us the power to do so if we needed to. But it gives us the power to search. But at the minute, we've had to pause that just because the force are obviously making sure that we're not putting adverse strain on other parts of the force, like custody and places like that, with things that are not essential at this moment in time. But it's at least for the next week. So hopefully, once that period has gone, like I said, if the compliance levels around COVID seem to be what we would like them to be, then we can obviously come back to what we call business as usual, and that warrant will be part of that work. What I will say is if this extends for a little bit longer and we're not able to, we won't not do that. We just won't be able to do it yet. So that still will get done in the future. But as I say, we've just got to watch a watching brief on it really at the moment. Moving on, there's drug use and drug dealing. Unfortunately, I get a lot of complaints about this, as I'm sure the local councillors do. I don't talk about it glibly, but obviously it does happen lots and, all over the place, really. So the team are doing what they can in relation to it. But obviously you go and deal with one issue in one location and then you get information about another one somewhere else. So we're kind of chasing it constantly. But it is a focus for the team. And what Craig said, there's 2 females that I think were problematic within Acocks Green, maybe in the village. I think he hasn't gone into that detail, who have started rehab programs recently, diverting them away from drug use and domestic abuse. And I think there were persistent shoplifters as well, the two. So that I said they're looking at enforcement. In the last week, they've completed some community protection warnings and community protection notices in relation to probably beggars, I think we call it, street drinkers and beggars in the village. I know the bid have put that towards Craig to say, can you do something about it? And they have done. And then what they're looking at is what we can do around some of the houses of multiple occupancy that cause problems. And he says he's got a day of action that's planned where he's going to work with the BCC enforcement team. I haven't got a date for that, but I know we've got local partners delivery group next week. So again, the enforcement day may well be, from a BCC perspective as well, may be delayed again for a period of time just based on COVID. So that's a general point really. Parking and speeding, again, I sent a WM Now message for anyone that signed up to WM Now. I sent a message out earlier saying, you know, what do you want me to tell you about within Yardley constituency, which includes Acocks Green? Unfortunately, I've had about 40 replies in about 3 hours. So I'm now scratching my head because I've now got a day's worth of work to look at the information that people want to know about to be able to give them something meaningful. So I should have known that when I sent the query out, to be honest, but that's the way it goes. But on that point, the speeding is obviously an issue everywhere. What I say to people who contact us is it feels to me that, and we've talked about this, I know at some of the meetings that myself and the councillors have been at, it doesn't make it right, by the way, but that when we went into lockdown, there were a lot less cars on the road, and the cars that were on the road treated it, you know, differently to as they were before March. And then unfortunately, a lot of those drivers don't seem to have amended their driving style. Now we've got a lot more cars on the road. So I know Craig has done, Sergeant Wallaway has done some speeding operations on Fox Hollies Road and other roads within the ward. But again, similar to drugs, it's kind of, you know, trying not to split ourselves spread ourselves too thinly and be right place, right time. We have got the support previously of our road harm reduction team, which is like a part of our traffic department, who will come along with the van and with some resources. But again, they're a forced resource. And as I've said already, the speeding isn't sort of restricted to Acocks Green or Yardley or even Birmingham. It's all over the force. So that's a fairly thin resource that Craig requests. And obviously when he gets it, you know, he'll put it out in the area. So that's pretty much the update from Craig. And then I've got some crime stats that I'll give you. And then also a little bit about COVID, where we're at currently. So I'll give you the categories. So what we call total recorded crime. So all crime that we record within West Midlands Police in the Acocks Green ward since the beginning of April, we've had 1,828 offences compared to 1,566 last year. So that's an increase of 16%, which is 262 offences. I don't expect anyone to write this down, by the way, but it's been recorded. So robbery, we've seen a 32% reduction, which is obviously really positive. Violence involving people under 25 has seen a 16% reduction. Knife crime, which sometimes comes into the under 25 category, obviously, we've seen a 10% reduction. Vehicle crime is a 12% reduction. Burglary, when someone breaks into your house, is a 5% reduction. And you're probably thinking, well, how have you ended up with a 16% increase when you've talked about all those reductions? And unfortunately, when we come down to domestic abuse, we've seen a 50% increase year to date for domestic abuse compared to the same time last year. And then when we look at hate crime, we've seen a 19% increase as well. So the hate crime relates to 9 more offences than the same time last year. When we look at domestic abuse, we've had 147 further offences this year than we had in the same period last year. So I think a lot of that, obviously, you know, most of the time we've talked about in that year to date was during lockdown. So where we saw reductions, and some of it will have been down to policing, if I'm honest, but much of it was down to the fact that people weren't going out. So people weren't having their houses broken into and street robberies weren't happening and knife crime wasn't so prevalent. However, when people are in their houses together, we see it at Christmas and other periods of the year where a lot of people can't live together. They do live together, but they're not able to, and they don't get on. And then unfortunately, you know, when they're in close proximity, and I guess with all the other pressures around furlough, losing jobs and all the other things that have come with lockdown, you know, that's where we've seen that increase of 50%. So it's reflected across the whole of Yardley constituency, and it's reflected across the whole of Birmingham East Neighbourhood Policing Unit, the wider area, and even from a force level, it's increased, not necessarily by the same percentage, but domestic abuse has gone up right across the board. So they're the crime stats. When we talk about, let me have a look. So when I look at our response to COVID, what we were doing along the guidelines that we had, or we still have actually up until a minute past midnight tomorrow morning, we were doing the 4-step approach, which was engage, explain, encourage, and then if we had to, it was enforce. You may have seen there was various chief constables, not ours, I don't think, but other chief constables were in the press today talking about, the first 3 E's we will go through, but we're going to get to the 4th one much more quickly than we were previously. And our force is no different to that. I don't think our chiefs come out and said that, but that is what we're doing. So as of tomorrow, basically, we'll still go through that process of that appeal. But the line is that everyone's had plenty of opportunity to know, understand, absorb what the restrictions are, and the ignorance element of what didn't know is not going to be something that we'll necessarily accept. And I'm not saying we accepted that before, but obviously things are getting a bit more serious again now. So from the perspective of how many, we call it a direction to leave, which is the overarching sort of title we give to when we see people. So that lady that spoke earlier about someone in Costa, if we went into Costa and there were 4 people in there and we said, well, where's your mask? What about this? What about that? That would count as one sort of incident in inverted commas. And then what we would do is record that on our app, on the officer's device, to show that we've had one incident where we've advised 4 people, and the advice can go from low-level compliance right through to a fixed penalty notice. So within Acocks Green, from the 1st of September until the end of October, there were 22 incidents, I would call it, or incidences where the officers have attended, and we've taken action against 82 people. I think I would say all of them, I can get the detail if I need it, but I think all of them will be the advice, put your mask on, you can't be in a group of that many, dispersal of people. I'm not aware that we've actually given any fines out to anybody within Acocks Green, but obviously from tomorrow, that could change ultimately. And the team they're on earlies today. It's their first one back. So they're on earlies tomorrow and Friday, and then they'll be on 3 late shifts. So, there will be activity within Acocks Green, in this coming week now. I think that's pretty much everything that I've prepped. I'm more than happy if anyone's got any questions or queries on any of that or anything else that's going on in Acocks Green that I'm able to comment on, and I'll gladly answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Simon?
I don't know whether you have any news on the future of our police station.
Yeah, and I know I speak to David Treadwell about this. Whenever I see David, he talks about this. And I mean, I've only been in Yardley since December last year, although I've been in Birmingham for a lot longer than that. And as far as I'm aware, there are no plans at the moment, especially with the current climate, where we're using all the bases that we have, because obviously in our stations we need to socially distance as well. So where we would have had, the Acocks Green team is increasing in size. Actually, don't let me forget, you're getting a new PCSO. If I forget to mention that, Roger, can you remind me? So I think where we are looking to use all available space, I don't think there's any plans at the minute for Acocks Green to shut. What I can't say, obviously, because these decisions are made at executive team level with the PCC, is that I can't say that will be the case forever. I'd like it to be, because I know I agree with David. It's a phenomenal building, and it is, not quite in the village, but it's, it's an iconic site. It's been there for a long time. So, I mean, and it's accessibility for all the teams that work there, because my South Yardley team work from there as well, and one of our neighbourhood task force departments work from there, amongst others. So as a location, it's perfect. The further away we get from the areas that we police, obviously the longer it takes for us to get to where we need to be. So I've got 2 teams based at Stetchford, which is where I generally am, and 2 teams at Acocks Green. So they're all nicely placed for the areas they cover. But like I say, I've got no further update on that. But I think, probably until COVID is hopefully a distant memory, or we have it under control, or whatever the case may be, there's no plans that I'm aware of for Acocks Green to look any different than it currently does, if that makes sense.
Hello, Chair.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. That's great. About the police station, it's like when we had our own buses, we felt we owned them. and it's the same as police stations and any other civic area. You know, they belong to the public, and the public feel part of it, and that's what we've missed over the years. It's like the councils do things out of need, not greed, and it's the same with police stations. They thoroughly, and yourselves, of course, I hate to say it, but you're owned by us at the moment, Simon. So, you know, the police are the public, and majority of them anyway. So you've got to believe that, and you haven't got a particularly easy job, to be fair. But what I was going to ask, Simon, we've met a couple of nice characters. We've got some new police officers, I think. I know the one, Jav, and I know that Kevin's leaving us at the end of the year, and I'm hoping to invite him and yourself, include yourself, and we're experimenting with an AGM in December, so we fingers crossed. But I just thought that we got some new members of the team, haven't we, in Acocks Green? And you know, people like to see them and acknowledge them. Have we got what's the full strength at the moment?
You know what, David? I knew you were going to ask me that, and I haven't got the exact number. What I can say is that I know, because what happens is we've got the officers that you will know of, like Matt Kay, Ian Upston, Andy Collis, Jav, the gent you've just spoken about. You've got Kev and you've got John. They're like the stalwarts of Al Davis. They're the stalwarts of the team. And then what we've had is Ifra Naz. She started in September. She's a police now officer, so she's posted to the team for at least the next 2 years. And then other than that, what we also get is officers who are on their sort of student rotation. So that's where I can't give you an exact number for them, but I know around Christmas time, Craig will have 2 PCSOs because Kev's leaving, but he's got a replacement coming. And he's got up to 10 constables. But what I'll say is those others, other than some of those officers I've just spoken about, are on that 10-week rotation. So they'll be with us for that period. And obviously then they'll do their bit, learning how to do neighbourhood policing for a little short stint. And then they disappear onto their next attachment. And then we'll have someone to take their place. So like I say, around sort of mid to end of December, the strength of the team is going to be phenomenal. And that's like I talked about before with Acocks Green as a base. One of the things that Craig's having to amend is how he briefs the team, because like what we would ordinarily do is get everyone in the briefing room, all sat around the table, cup of tea, get all the briefing, all the things up on the screen. But with COVID, we need to be distanced apart, you know, and so he's not able to do his briefing. So he's having to be a little bit innovative about how he does that. But on the point of the new PCSO, so there's a new PCSO called Gary Bannister, who is starting. He's in training at the moment. And what we have to do, we have to give them to a trained PCSO who can coach them, is the term that we use. So John Ludford is on a course next week, but for probably the first set, because Gary starts, I think, next week it is with us, what he's going to have to do is work on the Stetchford team for a week or so, because they've got trained tutors there. Once John's trained, Gary will then work with John and Kev for, you know, the November-December period that Kev's still with us. And then it will be Gary and John who will be our 2 PCSOs in Acocks Green. So I'm really chuffed that we've got that, to be fair, because obviously we're not always recruiting PCSOs. And it would be a bit of a shame, because Kev's retiring, as you know, but to just have John, you know, he's fine because John knows what he's doing. But, you know, I'm all about numbers. The more we've got, the more we can do, basically. So I'm chuffed that Sarah Burton, my superintendent, has posted Gary to Acocks Green. I haven't met him yet because, like I say, he's still in training, but he joins next week. So I'm sure you'll get to see his face around very soon.
Yeah, well, thanks, Simon. We've had some good teams in Acocks Green and really positive characters. And yourselves and Craig, certainly, from our experiences, certainly get engaged with the community. And if we could improve the input to board meetings as well, is the opportunity where we can all have an opportunity once a year or whatever to actually come together. I know you do change. You've got you get your profession and different advancements, but it's we need a little bit of where things are firmed up. We're not always, because at the moment we're always changing around. But we, you know, a bit of stability. Well, we need that in the nation, but we need a bit of stability so that we can now again relate to our different structures, our different agencies, all the front end merchants, people who run the thing.
I get that. I mean, what I'll say is from a excuse me. I mean, I wouldn't probably say this to all my teams, and I wouldn't say it just because I'm here in front of you. But the Acocks Green team is what I would say the best neighbourhood team that I've actually got out of the four. And Craig's a brilliant sergeant. I've known him for quite a few years, but he's fantastic, I think. And the team, they're really proactive, but they've got the community element, so they've got no issue, arresting people and doing what part of our job that we have to do. But then they've also got the other sections covered in relation to schools, junior PCSOs, things like that, the other sort of softer side of policing, I suppose. So I think there's a real good balance. But from a productivity out there, community engagement, doing all the core policing role, Acocks Green is definitely the team out of the four that I've got that does that every day, as far as I can see.
Yeah, but you've got more support. I suppose you all come under the law, Parliament and whatever, but we've got to bring things back more local. There's too much influence centrally. We've got to bring things down to the local area where we can all get involved and make things better. So thanks for that, Simon. And on behalf of the forum, thank your team for what they're doing.
Will do. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any further questions? I've got just one quick one myself, Simon, which is a few weeks back we had a series of thefts from vehicles, which basically appeared to be people ordering spare parts and people finding a vehicle of the right make and just taking it out of them. So there were cars with catalytic converters taken out of them, head bonnets removed and headlights removed, quite blatantly, cars parked in the road, quite staggering one. And I think the catalytic converter was taken from Morrison's car park during, shop opening hours. Is that part of a trend that, we're seeing more generally? And if so, what can the police do to try and...
So the first question is definitely a trend, and bizarrely, about an hour ago, I looked on Twitter, and over on the western side of the force, in I think it was Wolverhampton or Walsall, there's the police over there have discovered a stash of catalytic converters. So we do go through waves, not necessarily every year, and it isn't always the same time of year, because obviously a lot of crime is seasonal, where this sort of activity happens. And then we do also see, and this is a bit more less seasonal but more regular, where you'll have cars literally, like you say, parked secure overnight. It's not just in Yardley, it happens. And I think there was a nurse at Heartlands parked up somewhere near, came out the following morning after a night shift, and the bumper and the bonnet of her car had disappeared. Just by the very nature, I mean, I'm semi-handy, but I wouldn't know how to remove a catalytic converter or a bonnet or a bumper without being detected, without an angle grinder. So they're obviously really professional outfits, as sad as it is to say that. We always wonder where they go. Are they getting melted down, the catalytic converters, or are they being sold? I'm not sure what the resale purpose is, whether you can just go and fit it to another vehicle. So, excuse me. So it is something that we're aware of, and what will happen is, because it's generally linked to organised crime, there will be departments other than neighbourhood policing that, if we get information, intelligence to suggest that it is part of a particular group, then there'll be other teams that work within West Mids and the wider region that will take enforcement action against those particular individuals. But obviously, like I say, you park your car in your driveway, you come out the following morning, bits are missing, and you think, well, I didn't hear a thing. How did that happen? So that's how slick and professional they are, as sad as that is for me to say. But yeah, so it's not particularly targeted to Acocks Green or Yardley or Birmingham East. It is a wider issue, and it probably wider than West Midlands, to be fair, because these groups do travel some distance to do this sort of thing.
It did seem that we got sort of blitzed quite heavily for a period, and then I presume from what you're saying, they move on to somewhere else before, people catch up with them.
Yeah, that is pretty much it. I mean, I'm not aware of those incidents myself. It depends, because what will happen is, depending on who does our morning meeting, will prep for it. So it might have been that Trev Orton, who you also know, might have prepped for it. It might have happened over a weekend. So I'm not personally aware of those. Craig will be, and he will have, obviously, in the briefing that I talked about before, they'll go through the 24 hours worth of crime that's happened the day before. And then, where there's any sort of patrol strategy requirements about where we need to be, right place, right time, Craig will task the team. But many of those incidents, as you're aware, I mean, the Morrison's one might be different, happen in the middle of the night or overnight when the team don't work. So there is a gap. I mean, we've got cover from force response officers and traffic and other departments that work 24/7, but obviously neighbourhood teams work from 8 till 11, 6 days of the week, not every day the same shift, obviously. So the team will be aware of it, but again, like I say, they probably come and blitz it, and then they know that we're probably going to do something about it if it goes on for too long, so they move somewhere else. So like I said, that's where the other departments that have got access to other Gucci resources, that's where that sort of activity will be focused from a police perspective.
Okay, next I've got Nick. Nick, did you have a question, or was that hand up from a previous?
Sorry, I was still on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I've got just two things from me for Simon, I think. Well, the first one was actually, I dialed into that council meeting. I think yourself and John were in, Roger, and I think there's a petition had gone in for an average speed camera on Alton Boulevard. So that was correct, wasn't it? And I wasn't sure if, because obviously that was a complaint that Simon mentioned. Is that something that the kind of local police force are able to support at all? Or, it's obviously a common complaint around the Acocks Green area. Is that something that we could work together with there? I don't know, Roger, if you're able to help with that as well. I think that was something you raised at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, from a police perspective, sorry, Roger, from a police perspective, I mean, I have to say I'm not aware of that, but I mean, personally, I think we need to support it, but I suppose it always comes back to where's the funding? Is there a greater need elsewhere? Do you know what I mean? And you start competing against other areas across the city. But I mean, from a police perspective, I'd have to just double check, because obviously, personally, aside Graham, your inspector, I'd support that. There might be a force view, which I wouldn't imagine wouldn't be, let's support it, but I don't know what comes with that, if that makes sense. I don't know anything more about the actual petition, though, that you talk about.
Yeah, just on that, a local resident organised a change.org petition and got just over 200 people signing a petition calling for average speed cameras on Alton Boulevard East. There is a sort of bigger picture issue here in that stretch of road has been identified by our highways team as one that has a high level of accidents and will be looked at in the 2021-22 year as a candidate for local safety improvement measures. So hopefully that petition will sort of hit at the right time in terms of the work that's done to look at what can be done to improve the safety of the road, because obviously reducing speed is something that will significantly improve the safety.
Just out of interest, which part of Alton Boulevard East is it? Is the bit from Gospel Lane up towards Shirley Road, or further on towards Foxhollies?
Yeah, the first bit that you mentioned.
First bit, okay. And is it both ways, or any way in particular?
Speeding affects all of it, but yeah, that was the bit that drove the petition.
Yeah, I think the other half of it tends to have quite a few parked cars, doesn't it, on that near side as you go up towards the Foxhollies. But I know what you mean.
It makes it harder. It doesn't always stop them.
No, it can make it more dangerous sometimes, can't it? Well, like I say, I know when Craig's done some speeding operations with the team, I know they've done Foxhollies, and I'm sure they've done Alton Boulevard. But again, with not just in COVID times, but with all the competing demands, it's trying to just, I use the analogy of spinning the plates, of doing something on everything, and at the right time doing more on something than something else, if that makes sense. So it is an ongoing thing, and Craig, like I say, he'll alternate what he's able to do each day, each week with the team that he's got and the staff who are available and all the rest of it. But I know he's spoken to John Butler, like I said, who's the road harm reduction team sergeant. And I think, I can't quote this now definitely, but I'm pretty sure they've been in that area But again, like I said, they're spread across the whole force. So I'll speak to Craig and see what his plans are about getting the team down there again, our team in Acocks Green, and also the Road Harm team, and see if we can do something down there. But I say at the minute, we're not going to, for at least the next week at least, like I said at the beginning, our focus is obviously on COVID-19 and breach activity. And then hopefully if we get some compliance, we'll be able to look at some other parts of neighbourhood policing again.
Okay, thanks. John.
Then, sorry, just the other one from me was it's just on, I think a few weeks ago there was a kind of near where I am on Douglas Road near the station, and that is there's a dispersal order put out around like the Stockfield estate. And I think that was to do with some kind of antisocial behaviour and stuff going on at the time. I was just wondering, obviously, if similar things are happening, tying in with the kind of COVID restrictions, in terms of like escalating that to the kind of local police team, what's the best route? I mean, I follow you on Twitter, but I wasn't going to tweet you about it. But obviously, you wouldn't necessarily want to ring 999 about it either. So I don't know, what's the quickest and best route to kind of get into contact with the local guys? Is it 101 or I don't know? Yeah, just a bit of advice.
Yeah, so what I would advise, because on occasion I've had to phone the police myself from home and it's painful, let me tell you. I've got no hotline for people to answer the phone. So I think what we do, and I joke when I say this, I think we don't answer the phone to force people to use the what's it called? Live chat. My wife's telling me live chat. That's what it is. So if you go on the website, if you access the interweb, which I guess you have, and then do a live chat, somehow you can make contact with someone within a few minutes rather than sit on the phone for 45. So that's what I would advise if it's not an emergency. But then what we have had all the way through, you'll see some of the footage on social media where we've gone to shisha lounges and parties and raves and weddings and things like that. What we've got is called Operation Reliance, which you won't need to quote, but if you phone up and say there is a breach happening at, or whatever the case may be, we have resources on all the time, which is our Operation Reliance resources. Again, they're a force-wide resource. I don't know what the exact number looks like, but it's not like, 2 people in a Panda. There's quite a few officers doing it, and then they'll be deployed across the force, more likely to the bigger venues. If it's something that's happening, depending on the nature of the incident and what else is happening, we might get resource come to a lower level incident, and that's more force-wide and generally for the larger gatherings. But then locally, we have what we call a COVID car, I suppose you would call it. That's what we call it, which is a few officers in different vehicles across Birmingham East neighbourhood policing unit. So you've got the other constituencies within that, obviously, and then they will attend other breaches. That's what we've been doing for some time. Further than that, in this current period, this next week or so, all the resources we have will be put towards COVID. So if you phoned up tonight about a breach somewhere, staff that are on will be deployed to that, and that'll be the same at least for the next week or so, like I said. So the only thing that we're able to do other than COVID enforcement, patrol and stuff like that. And I would say enforcement, it's not all about enforcement. We've got high footfall areas where we're going to show that visible presence. So in the village, other areas within Yardley, shopping areas, the Swan, the Yew Tree, Setchard Retail Park, the Wheatsheaf, those sort of places of worship, because we've just, as you may have seen in the press, the security risk for counter-terrorism has just been increased. So we've got some coverage around our religious establishments across Birmingham, but across the force as well. And there's a few of them within Yardley constituency. So yeah, I'd say live chat if it's not an emergency, and then the relevant resource will be deployed, because if you just want to wait for the Acocks Green team to be on, they do 3 earlies and 3 lates and 3 off. So if you want them to come, they might not come. But if you want the police, then I'd advise to do that in a non-emergency. And then you know at the minute, like I say, it's all answered the pump in relation to COVID.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay.
John, do you have a question?
Oh yes, just to say that it seems to be that there's a bit of a rotating order list for spare parts. A few years ago, it was wing mirrors for BMW Minis being nicked to order. Then went through a patch of, I think it was front end of Ford cars and the Focuses, and now it's the Corsa that gets being targeted. So it doesn't seem to be this gang that roll up, hit an area, and disappear again. But I thank you for the increased presence we've seen around the village lately. I know that's been a complaint for some time from the businesses down there and from people. They really do like seeing the officers down there. I know we're going to miss Kevin when he disappears, but I'm really pleased to hear we get a replacement. And is there any opportunity, you think, to get the speed van down Alton Boulevard? I know
Craig's. I think Craig's queried that before. I'd have to dig back through my memory bank to find out what the answer is. And I think what they'll say is they've been either Fox Hollies or Alton Boulevard previously. So I don't think they do it on a rotation. I think, but if Craig went back to them saying, right, can you give us a date, which I'll ask him to do actually, and then find out when. But I know he's made inquiries in the last few months, 3 or 4 months, I can guarantee, because I've seen an email or had some contact from him about it. And I think the answer wasn't no, but it wasn't yes, we'll do it tomorrow. So I think it was like saying sort of all those roads that we identify across the force where there's a problem, that van will be placed at different places. I did see it on. Fortunately, I saw it when I was going the right way, if I'm honest, on Stockfield Road. It was a couple of months ago, but it was on the part of the carriageway, Stockfield Road, by the petrol station, just where it opens into like a dual carriageway. And then when I came back the other way, I'd adjusted my speed, and it was actually on the other side of the road. So so I have seen it out, but I know that's not where we're talking about, but it is out and about.
No, I know that's a really common spot for it. I know it does Fox Hollies as well, but I've not seen it on the boulevard. But that is a nice little spot.
I'll speak to Craig about that and just see, because like I say, if they'll put it where we ask them to, then we'll get it on the roadster to say, can you get it on Boulevard East, this stretch here, and then obviously we'll get a date for that, and then we can give some feedback as to yes, it's been there, and these are the results.
Yeah, I mean, the other chunk of Alton Boulevard has the problem where people don't realise it's not a dual carriageway, and we end up with more than our fair share of head-on collisions down there. But thank you, Si. Good to see you.
No problem. Thanks, John.
David, did you have a further question, or was that? David?
It's Veronica here. Veronica. Hi, Simon. There are two things. First of all, the problem that they had in Stockfield with this group that they moved on, what happened, they apparently, talking to Kevin, they moved them on, took a few details, a few names, and of course they promptly moved down to Millennium Green, which then they were gathering in, and they were young teenagers gathering in, and of course they were then called down there and again, and I think what they do in the end, your police, they sort of if they get two names twice, they'll then take them home and speak to the parents, and it's all to do, they've got nowhere to go, have they? And they just move around, and they don't want to just move in small groups. They're normal teenagers. There were 20 of them, yeah. But when I went past, apart from their language a bit, they weren't obviously doing any problem. But it made it difficult for people to walk past them. I think that was the problem. The other thing is, we live in Malden Road, nice far road. The house at the bottom. Number 50 is owned by Mr. Hussein. He lived there for about 3 years. Then it sort of went. It was empty. It had lodgers. They had all sorts of people renting it. And then at one point we didn't really know. It was suddenly found to be full of cannabis and then that was all dealt with and everything. He said he lets it through an agent. It's nothing to do with him. Then this year we've found habits happen again. I mean, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I looked out. There are 4 hooded, masked guys coming out of the Millennium Green at 1 o'clock in the morning. Got to the house, come out chased by 2 guys with weapons and all this. Police managed to catch one of them, but because he was in the garden, he claimed he had nothing to do with the property, and it was full top to bottom with cannabis. More recently, the house number 48, sadly the resident died and it's up for sale, but the other week, and it must have been reported because you've had details of it, Our neighbour across the road, it's at 9:30 in the evening. There are 9 guys, all, you know, black tarp, mask, 3 cars, and they're trying to get into number 48. Mr. Hussein has been down to 50 and had it all stripped out, and occasionally he's been living there. We don't know whether it's living there now, but these 9 guys had machetes, and they were trying to jemmy open the door of number 48, and the neighbour happened to come up, and he was using his tablet, and he was threatened by these guys to say, you know, get back in, and they drove off. But it's a concern because it's the one house, it's the same owner who always denies any knowledge, of course, does it through a thing. But it's a concern because, as I say, we're a very sort of, you know, it's a nice neighbourhood, and that house seems to be having properties selling it because of the one that's next door, you know. And I just wondered if there's anything. I mean, Anne is on, she'll support this, but it is a concern as to how it comes on, keeps reoccurring with the same property, and the owner seems to have there's no recourse against him in any way.
Okay, so on the first point then, just around the Stockfield Park incident, so there was, I know someone mentioned it earlier and I meant to talk about it. So there's a Section 30 dispersal order that got authorised. It wasn't by me, it was by a different inspector at that location. And then it was as a result of youth gathering and some antisocial behaviour. For those that follow the neighbourhood team on Twitter, they did a weapons sweep the following day. I think they got the dispersal order on a Saturday, did a weapons sweep in that area, which is where they'll go and they'll search in bushes and bins and things like that. You'll probably see quite a lot of that from the Acocks Green team. We've got an operation called Operation Guardian, which is our under 25 response operation. So we have a part to play in that, and weapons sweeps is one of our standard tactics. And when they did a weapons sweep and they found, I think it was 11 different items. Some were obvious weapons and some were sort of made into a weapon. So that was really positive because obviously, it was positive that we found them. It wasn't positive that they were there, if that makes sense. But it's positive that we found those items, which clearly, you know, whether they were owned by those young people, I don't know. But it's clearly a stash area, as we would say, where people are going to chuck their knives. So if they get stopped by the police walking down the street, they haven't got it on them. But if they need it, you know, they know where it is. If you know what I mean, if it's in the bin or under the bin or on a roof of a building or in a bush in some long grass. So that was the first aspect. The other thing I didn't mention a little bit earlier, and again, I've seen them tweeting on social media. So the City Council employs some youth workers that are called the violence interrupters. That's not like a street name, that's what they're called. So there's only 2 of them and they service the whole of the city. But on the back of some information received about a month ago now about youths causing antisocial behaviour, drugs and all manner of things, nothing like really, really serious, if I'm honest, within Gospel Park. So I bid for those violence interrupters to be in Gospel Park, and they're in there on every Tuesday. They've been in for about the last 3 Tuesdays now, 2:30 till 4, and they've spoken to some local people. I don't know if you've seen them or not. They usually have a tabard with youth worker on the back, but they've been in the park and they've spoken to local people, spoken to some local young people who have said, well, we've got nothing to do. So I think one of the things that is there next stage after they've identified there's a gap in provision is to try and do something in the area to give those young people something to do, if that makes sense. So that's like a work in progress, and it's really good because I had them previously in Sheldon and they didn't really get anywhere. So I had a problem in Sheldon with other matters, and I think they were there at the wrong time, in fairness. But it's good that within Yardley they are where they are, and they're getting, we're going to see some benefit from the work they're doing with engaging with young people, and also speaking to other people in the community, and the people have told them about the quad bikes, so they're aware of those same issues. What they don't like to do, just in case you're wondering, not for any untoward reason, they don't like to work with the police, because what they don't want, if they're trying to get trust and confidence from young people and they see us walking around with our PCSOs, that young people will think, well, you're just like the police, we're not going to talk to you. So there is a distance, but they do send us the feedback every week with not who they've engaged with, but the general gist of how it's gone and what they're planning to do. So they've been there now, so I think for the last 3 Tuesdays, and at the moment there's no plans to move them anywhere else, because they need to be in the right place for a length of time to be able to get a flavour of what's going on and start building some rapport with young people and local people. So that's another aspect of some work that's going on in the area.
Yeah.
In relation to Malvern Road, so yes, I was aware of this. I think it was last Monday or Tuesday last week, not this week. And the latest incident you talked about, going back before that, I know there was an incident in 2017. There was an incident, I think it was June this year, where you talk about a person did get arrested. The process was followed in relation to him being arrested, interviewed, and a decision was made. It was nothing to do with the neighbourhood team, that no further action was going to be taken against him. So no further action was taken. And then we had the incident a couple of weeks ago, last week, where obviously there are these mass people trying to force entry into number 48. And I think what I would say is that, again, it's a little bit like the bits stolen off vehicles. They know where these places are, people who go. And what they do is when a cannabis factory is due for harvesting, we would say, i.e. it's ready to go, you have houses that we might not know or suspect or believe that are being used for that purpose, or even, there's warehouses. You see on social media some places where there's like £1 million worth of cannabis growing in a massive warehouse or an old disused pub, and you're like, blimey, how did nobody know it was there? But we don't always, and again, local people might not see it or might not put two and two together. So, I think what probably happened is, as bizarre as it sounds, the groups that have probably been involved in those cannabis factory thefts previously, and we've had other areas, Alexandra Road, for instance, there's been a couple up there, I know, in the last 6 to 8 months or so, where that exact same thing has happened, and we have arrested people from those.
Yeah.
Say again, sorry.
We think they got the wrong house.
Yeah, I think with this one, yes. Yeah. So I think what they've done, they've probably seen number 48, which, as you say, I think the elderly person that lived there has passed away. Yeah, no one's living in there present. I think they've assumed that's the property. So what we've done in relation to that is I won't bore you with the detail, but we've recorded the relevant crime for that attempted burglary at that location, and we've sent the crime number to the lady who's got possession of that property at the moment. And then Craig has visited Mr. Hussein. So I think after the event, we had an email from a lady that I saw that went to Craig to say, not sure what's going on, not sure the police did a great job. So Craig made contact. Kev was up there, I think, the same day or the following day once we received the information. Spoke to people that were present or who contacted us and restored some faith, I think, in the local community. And then they've spoken to Mr. Hussein, and I spoke to Craig about it only recently, to be fair, the end of last week, is that he is back living there. And he's doing the property up, or it's been done up, you'll know better than I, and he's living in it. So at the moment, I suppose it could look like he's renting that out and knows it's being used as a cannabis factory. At the minute, there's no evidence that that's the case for the previous 2 incidents, and obviously this one, potentially they were looking for number 50 and they went to 48, I'm not sure. So I wouldn't say he's on our radar, but we're aware of him and the fact he owns that house. And obviously if we get other untoward activity, then obviously we'll focus put our focus where it needs to be, and if that's towards Mr. Hussein to ask him some more questions, then we will do. But at the minute, there's nothing to link him to any particular crime. He's living in that house. It's been, as you'll know, it's probably been renovated to the point where he can live in it. So that's kind of where we're at on that one at the moment. But like I say, it's I know it's horrible, I guess, to see, especially that night, people with weapons trying to force entry. But like I suppose what I would say is don't be alarmed, because it's not. It sounds weird. Don't be alarmed, because it's not just that road. You know what I mean? This does happen, not every night, but it does happen because that's what they do. Rather than trying to grow the drugs themselves and take all the risks that go with that, they find out where the cannabis factories are and then go and steal them when they're ready to harvest. And so it's again,
we assume.
Yeah, and again, it fuels, organised crime. It fuels organised crime. So obviously, there's a lot of drugs there to be sold ultimately from a cannabis factory, and then they'll sell that and then reinvest it as they do and do other things. So so we've done what we can in relation to try and help local people restore their faith in the police. Because what you sometimes get is you'll phone 999 and you get the 24/7 police that generally turn up. And you might not, if I'm honest, and I'll say this really freely, you might not always get the service that you would want or expect. And we always say, you give the service that I'd want to receive. If I'd phone the police, what would I expect? So a lot of us try and operate like that. Unfortunately, there's some officers, whether it's a lack of training or whatever the case may be, lack of service sometimes. Some of them have literally just joined and don't really know, which way's up, a lot of them. It doesn't excuse it. But that's sometimes what you get from the 24/7. And also, there's so much demand on them. Sometimes it's, can we deal with this job sort of quickly, I suppose, ultimately to move on to the next one. Whereas neighbourhood policing isn't about that. We're about the medium to long term. So that's why you'll get a lot more of our time, because that's what we're here to do to improve the area.
Thank you. It's just frustrating, you know, when we're a dead end and there are 3 cars parked there that, you know, couldn't, if the police had come then, there's nowhere for them to go. I mean, they could do a runner, but, you know, it's, and it's the same with these, you know, the young guys who stand there waiting and they get their drugs there. And these cars come down. And again, they're so blasé with it. They just pull up, hand over the money exchange and everything. And I mean, we've reported and you know, that you take the number and then you take the number and it's the same car and the same car. And you just think, well, if they come straight away, there's nowhere for the car to go, you know, because we're such a dead end. Yeah, but anyway, thank you very much. As long as it's on your radar, which it obviously is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that's all the questions we had. So thank you very much, Simon, for joining us this evening. It's very much appreciated, as you will have seen from the number of questions that you've had.
I thought it was me because you know what I'm like for talking. I can talk quite a lot, but I did have quite a few questions, so I think it's not just me.
No, it's been very much appreciated. We are getting towards the end of the time for the meeting, so we haven't got someone. We were down one of the items, the next item on the agenda. We were going to have an update from highways, but Kevin Gibbon, the highway steward from Kier, is unable to attend and has given his apologies. So in the sort of limited time left, are there any updates or issues from residents, community and voluntary groups that anyone would want to raise? Anne?
It's about Dudley Road surgery. I did see your item on the Facebook, but a lady who lives locally, who's in her mid-80s and hard of walking, she's very worried because she obviously the surgery was in walking distance, and now she's very loath to sort of try and get to King's Heath or to Solihull. And she did phone me up and speak to me about it the other day. And I wondered if there's some pressure that can be put more onto them sorting something out quicker rather than later. I know they've got an extra year. But move all the surgery to away from that.
Yeah, if I pick up that, I mean, that in a way that I think that conflates 2 separate issues. There is a general policy by a number of surgeries to have different coding. So some of them will not accept any physical consultations at the building. This is all about COVID, whereas others are COVID secure and will take, you know, physical visits from those surgeries that won't take them. And Dudley Park is one of those that's not taking them for COVID reasons. So it's not about it's not that they're doing that because of the, you know, the issues around their location. It's a response to COVID that a number of other surgeries are doing. It's perhaps an unfortunate sorry?
It's a coincidence then.
Yeah, well, yes, it's an unfortunate coincidence, and maybe they might have thought that they could have rejigged things around another way to avoid that, given the problems that particular surgery's had. But there we are. That's what they're doing, and I'm sure they've got their reasons for it. They have got, as I put in the post, I mean, they have got another year now. Yes. But you know, we don't know how long the COVID crisis will carry on, and during that time, it's clear there's relatively little bandwidth to you know, look for new surgeries while they are doing that. But in terms of getting help from the rest of the NHS, there's you know, priorities are elsewhere at the moment. They are looking at a number of locations in Acocks Green, but it's, as we all know, it's difficult in Acocks Green, and they haven't yet got to a point of finding a site that they can move on. But you know, hopefully that extra year will allow them to do that, but we'll just have to see. In the meantime, I am passing on, you know, any complaints or concerns people have. So if people do either have complaints directly or hear of people who want to raise a complaint, I am feeding them into the senior management team at Midland Medical Practice, and getting, to be fair to them, they respond very quickly and promptly to those. And I think, and I've had the meeting I had last week talking through the issues they've had on customer service with them, and I hope they, you know, will turn the corner on that one now, as you know, and they're showing the willingness to look at it, so hopefully they will.
So if I ask her to send any complaint to you, then you can sort of feed it into the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's not my doctor's, mine's Hall Green Health, so I didn't know what was going on there.
Yeah, sure. I'm very happy to do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other issues? We're running out of time now. So anything else urgent? John, did you have anything you wanted to raise?
Just really briefly, thank you, Roger. Just to remind people that the City Centre Remembrance Sunday service has been cancelled for this year. It'll be online only, with a service from the cathedral, and there also won't be the annual Armistice Day service in Acocks Green. So those have both been lost this year, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Yes, another sad loss to COVID-19, indeed. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everybody for attending. I think it has worked much better in this format, so we'll let out review it, but we'll probably look to carry on with this format in the future, hopefully.
Roger?
Yep.
It's Veronica here. Just going on from what John was saying, I was in the village today, just sorting out the war memorial, and Reverend Andrew Bullock came up, and what they've done is he was putting up notices actually either side of the memorial there. They usually have a service at St Mary's on the Sunday, and then on the 11th they always have something around the memorial. So, but what he's doing is they've pre-recorded both services. So if you look on, I mean, he's put notices up to say, well, I don't know whether it's on YouTube or if it's on Zoom, but the one will go out actually on Sunday at presumably 4 to 11 or whatever it is. And then, but he's definitely done something that you can go online and get it on there. I'm not too sure of the actual format for that.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Maybe if we could circulate the link or whatever for that.
Yeah, I think he's put 2 notices up, Roger, and right. I was busy
I'll go and have a look.
So I didn't really see it, but he would be able to give you the link. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. As I say, please stay safe, and we'll see you soon at the next one of these, hopefully.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.